The suitcase trembled in Cassandra's hand as she closed the apartment door for the last time, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird seeking freedom. Rain poured in relentless sheets, washing away her tears as she hurried down the darkened street. Headlights from passing cars illuminated her face in harsh flashes, each one making her flinch as though Peter might materialize from any of them. The bus station's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting sickly shadows across faces that seemed to watch her with too much interest. The midnight bus to Philadelphia wheezed to a stop before her, its doors opening like the mouth of an uncertain future. She clutched her ticket so tightly it tore at the edges, her phone deliberately left behind in the apartment drawer where Peter would eventually find it. Philadelphia had changed in the 8 years since she'd last visited Aunt Harriet, the familiar streets now seeming narrower, buildings leaning in as though whispering secrets she wasn't meant to hear. Memories flooded back of summers spent chasing fireflies in her aunt's small backyard, before Peter had systematically disconnected her from everyone. The old brownstone stood exactly as she remembered, though the neighboring buildings seemed somehow different, freshly painted in some places, strategically dilapidated in others. Wind chimes on Aunt Harriet's porch sang their familiar melody, the only welcome sound in a strangely quiet street. "Cassie?" Aunt Harriet's voice cracked with emotion as she opened the door, her eyes widening at the soaked figure on her doorstep. "My God, you're soaked through! Come in," she urged, pulling Cassandra inside with surprising strength. The smell of cinnamon and cloves wrapped around Cassandra like a familiar blanket as she stepped into the warmth of her aunt's home. New curtains hung in the windows, positioned strategically, as if to allow someone to look out without being seen from the street. Steam rose from the mug of tea Aunt Harriet pressed into her trembling hands, the older woman's eyes examining her niece's face with a mixture of relief and poorly disguised alarm. "You didn't tell him where you were going, did you?" Cassandra shook her head, sipping the hot liquid that burned her throat, but somehow didn't warm the ice that had settled in her chest over years of Peter's subtle cruelty. "He doesn't know I have any family left. He thinks you moved to Arizona years ago." The guest room remained exactly as she remembered, down to the patchwork quilt her grandmother had made, though she couldn't help but notice the new deadbolt on the window. Outside, a black sedan drove slowly past the house, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights. "The neighborhood's changed some," Aunt Harriet admitted over breakfast, sliding a plate of pancakes across the worn kitchen table. "New businesses opened up, some closed down. I've been at Bellini's restaurant for almost 3 years now, cooking for the dinner crowd." Her aunt's eyes darted to the window as she spoke, a subtle movement that might have gone unnoticed by someone less attuned to the micro-expressions of fear. Something unspoken lingered in the air between them, heavy as the morning humidity that pressed against the windows. "You should come by the restaurant. They're always looking for help, and the tips are good," Aunt Harriet suggested, carefully folding dishcloths with practiced precision. "The owner's particular about who works there, but I could put in a word for you." The street outside seemed to come alive as morning progressed, but in ways that struck Cassandra as oddly choreographed, the same men in suits appearing at regular intervals, nodding respectfully to certain neighbors while completely ignoring others. A sense of invisible boundaries became apparent. Cassandra stepped onto the porch, breathing in air that tasted of approaching autumn, and something else she couldn't quite identify, a tension that seemed to vibrate between the buildings. Her attention caught on a man across the street, watching her with undisguised interest. The man's gaze lingered a moment too long before he turned away, disappearing into a sleek black car identical to the one she'd seen the night before. When she mentioned it to Aunt Harriet, the older woman's lips thinned to a tight line. Walking the familiar streets of her childhood should have brought comfort, but instead, Cassandra felt eyes tracking her movements from behind curtains and store windows. Corner shops, she remembered, had transformed into upscale cafes and boutiques. A group of men outside the local barbershop fell silent as she passed, their conversation resuming only when she turned the corner, the weight of their stares pressing against her back. Cassandra quickened her pace, memories of Peter's surveillance merging with this new, undefined threat. Bellini's restaurant stood at the corner of Maple and Fifth, its tastefully weathered exterior suggesting decades of history despite having opened just 4 years ago, according to the small plaque beside the door. Crystal chandeliers visible through the windows cast prismatic light across white tablecloths. The maitre d' assessed Cassandra with calculating eyes when she asked about her aunt, his stance shifting subtly from dismissive to attentive when Harriet's name left her lips. "Wait here," he instructed, disappearing through a door marked private. The kitchen bustled with controlled chaos, chefs moving with military precision under the watchful eye of a tall woman whose authority radiated from her like heat. Aunt Harriet beamed at the sight of her niece, quickly introducing her to the stern-faced woman. Beth's inspection was thorough and unnerving, her eyes traveling from Cassandra's face to her hands, as if assessing her value like merchandise. "We need someone for the private dining rooms upstairs," she finally said, her voice carrying a hint of an accent Cassandra couldn't place. "Private rooms?" Cassandra asked, glancing at her aunt, who suddenly seemed fascinated with the arrangement of herbs on her cutting board. Beth's smile didn't reach her eyes as she gestured toward a narrow staircase at the back of the kitchen. The second floor of Bellini's was another world entirely. Plush carpets muffled their footsteps as Beth led her down a hallway lined with heavy wooden doors, each bearing only a small number in gold. "These are for our special guests," Beth explained. Beth handed Cassandra a black dress still wrapped in plastic, the designer label making her eyes widen. "You'll start tonight," she stated, offering no room for negotiation. 7 sharp. Wear your hair up and no perfume. Our guests prefer subtlety." Walking home, Cassandra felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. Something about Beth's demeanor and the hushed opulence of those upstairs rooms stirred memories of how Peter had slowly isolated her from her world. Yet the prospect of steady income was too tempting to refuse. She spotted the black sedan again, parked half a block from Aunt Harriet's house, its engine idling. As she drew closer, the driver, a broad-shouldered man with close-cropped hair, stepped out and opened the back door with practiced efficiency. A man emerged from the back seat, his movements fluid and unhurried. Tall and lean, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit that whispered of wealth rather than shouting it. His eyes found hers immediately, as if he'd been waiting for her approach. "Cassandra Hayes," he said, her name in his mouth not a question but a confirmation. "I've been looking forward to meeting you. I'm William. I own the neighborhood, including your aunt's house, and Bellini's, where I understand you'll be working." The way William said "own the neighborhood" sent a cold ripple down Cassandra's spine. Not a figure of speech, but a statement of absolute fact. His smile never reached his eyes as he extended his hand, the gesture both invitation and command. "I make it a point to welcome newcomers personally," he continued, his voice carrying the smooth cadence of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His grip was firm but not aggressive when she reluctantly shook his hand, his skin surprisingly warm against her chill fingers. Something behind his carefully constructed facade flickered when he noticed the fading bruise on her wrist, partially concealed by her sleeve. His expression shifted momentarily, before settling back into practiced neutrality, but not before Cassandra caught a flash of genuine anger. That evening at Bellini's, Cassandra learned the true nature of the establishment as she served private rooms filled with impeccably dressed men, conducting business in hushed tones. Conversations abruptly halted when she entered, resuming only after she departed. The man in room 3 never looked up from his papers when she brought his whiskey, but as she turned to leave, his words stopped her. "If he finds you, I can make him disappear." Her blood froze as she realized he wasn't speaking to his companions, but directly to her. William occupied room 1, the largest of the private dining areas, holding court with an assortment of people who seemed to represent every corner of Philadelphia's power structure. Politicians, police officers, business owners, all deferring to him with unmistakable respect, tinged with fear. He beckoned her over as the night progressed, introducing her to his associates with a proprietary air that made her skin crawl, yet simultaneously offered a strange sense of protection. "Cassandra is Harriet's niece," he explained, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. The weight of William's attention followed her throughout the evening, his eyes finding her across crowded rooms with unsettling consistency. When she dropped a glass, shattering it against the hardwood floor, she froze in terror, memories of Peter's rage at such mistakes flooding back. Instead of anger, William appeared beside her with surprising speed, waving away the approaching manager. "Leave it," he commanded, his voice quiet but brooking no argument. To Cassandra he murmured, "Not everyone punishes accidents, Cassandra." The implications of his words, that he knew about Peter, about her past, left her speechless as he guided her away from the broken glass. His hand on her elbow was gentle, but she felt the unmistakable weight of ownership in his touch. Walking home that night, Cassandra noticed 2 men trailing at a discreet distance, maintaining the same pace. When she quickened her steps, they matched her. When she slowed, they adjusted accordingly. Their presence, oddly enough, felt more like an escort than a threat. Aunt Harriet was waiting up despite the late hour, her worried expression easing slightly at the sight of her niece returning safely. "How was your first night?" she asked, careful neutrality in her voice betraying her awareness of Bellini's true nature. "William knows about Peter," Cassandra stated flatly, watching her aunt's reaction carefully. Harriet's shoulders slumped slightly. "Confirmation enough. How long has he been watching me? How does he know about the bruises? About why I left?" The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence that followed, marking the seconds before Aunt Harriet finally spoke. "I called an old friend when you showed up on my doorstep. Word travels fast in this neighborhood, especially to him. Nothing happens here without William knowing." Cassandra felt the walls of her new sanctuary contract around her, the realization that she had fled one man's control only to land in the territory of another, making her breath catch painfully in her chest. "What does he want from me, Aunt Harriet?" "I protect what's mine," William stated simply the next evening, appearing beside Cassandra at the service station as she prepared a tray of drinks. His proximity sent a conflicting shiver of fear, and something more disturbing, safety, through her veins. The following weeks established a routine: evenings at Bellini's, days spent cautiously exploring her reclaimed freedom, always under the watchful eyes of William's men who maintained a respectful distance. Their presence became a paradoxical comfort, a shield against the specter of Peter's return. Cassandra learned William's operation through whispered conversations among staff. His control extended beyond this neighborhood into much of Philadelphia's underworld, a complex network of protection rackets, gambling operations, and political influence peddled with calculated precision. No violence unless absolutely necessary. William preferred power through intelligence rather than brute force. His interest in her remained perplexing, manifesting in small ways: a black sedan waiting when rainstorms threatened, anonymous deliveries of books she'd mentioned enjoying, a pair of expensive noise-canceling headphones after she'd flinched at a shattering glass. William watched her reactions to these gifts with the intensity of a scientist observing an experiment. One night, arriving for her shift, she found William in heated discussion with a police captain in the restaurant's back office, their conversation cutting off abruptly when she appeared in the doorway. "Stay after closing," William instructed her, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. The restaurant emptied gradually, staff performing closing rituals with practiced efficiency until only Cassandra remained, nervously folding linens in the private dining room where William had told her to wait. She startled when he entered, 2 crystal glasses and an amber bottle in hand. "Your ex-boyfriend made inquiries at your old apartment complex yesterday," William announced without preamble, pouring 2 fingers of whiskey into each glass and sliding one toward her. "He's looking for you, though not very intelligently." William's network of informants was evidently vast, his knowledge of her past alarmingly detailed as he recounted Peter's movements with clinical precision. "You're not the first woman to seek refuge in my territory from men who didn't deserve them," he explained, studying her over the rim of his glass. Their conversation shifted unexpectedly as midnight approached, William revealing fragments of himself, raised by a grandmother who cleaned houses in this very neighborhood, education at prestigious schools earned through scholarships, a meteoric rise through Philadelphia's criminal hierarchy. His path to power seemed a deliberate rejection of vulnerability, a lesson Cassandra understood too well. "Why help me?" Cassandra finally asked, the question that had burned in her mind since discovering his surveillance. William's smile contained a rare flash of genuine emotion, a glimpse behind the calculated facade he maintained. "Because you remind me of someone I couldn't save," he answered, unexpected honesty in his voice. "And because men like your Peter are predators who mistake fear for respect, something I find particularly distasteful." The boundaries between protector and captor blurred dangerously as William offered her a job beyond serving drinks, managing the legitimate books for several of his businesses, a position that would keep her within his sphere while offering genuine financial independence. The choice felt both liberating and binding, a gilded cage still being a cage. Cassandra accepted with clear conditions: no direct involvement in illegal activities, no interference in her personal life, and an agreement that his men would be less conspicuous in their surveillance. William's amused respect at her negotiation attempt only reinforced her suspicion that he had already anticipated and accepted these terms. Their new arrangement brought Cassandra into a different level of William's world. The upper office of Bellini's transformed into her workspace, surrounded by legitimate invoices and payroll documents that nonetheless served as cover for more questionable financial movements. Her accounting degree, abandoned when Peter insisted she focus on supporting his career, now proved unexpectedly valuable. As weeks passed, Cassandra recognized the dangerous comfort growing between them, William's protective orbit becoming a space where she felt genuinely secure for the first time in years. The price of this security, her tacit acceptance of his criminal enterprise, seemed increasingly justifiable when balanced against the alternative of facing Peter alone. October brought crisp air and changing leaves to Philadelphia, mirroring the transformation in Cassandra's life as she grew more confident navigating William's complex world. The restaurant staff now treated her with deferential respect, recognizing her elevated position within their employer's hierarchy. Her workspace expanded to include oversight of 3 more legitimate businesses: a laundromat, a car service, and a small property management company, all serving as effective fronts for William's less legal operations. Cassandra maintained her ethical boundary by focusing exclusively on the legitimate side, though the artificial separation grew increasingly transparent. Weekly dinners with William became routine, ostensibly to discuss business, but evolving into intellectual sparring, matches that left her both exhilarated and unsettled. His mind worked in fascinating patterns, strategic, 10 steps ahead, yet capable of surprising emotional insight that contradicted his ruthless reputation. Power and protection are different sides of the same coin, William observed during one such dinner, examining the ruby-colored wine in his glass with critical appreciation. The difference lies entirely in how they're wielded, and toward what purpose. Aunt Harriet remained cautiously supportive, though concern shadowed her eyes whenever William's name entered their conversations. "He's different with you," she admitted reluctantly one Sunday morning, while they prepared breakfast together. "I've never seen him genuinely interested in anyone before. It's both promising and worrying." On a rare day off, Cassandra ventured beyond William's territory to a downtown shopping district, savoring the anonymity of crowds and the absence of watchful eyes. The sensation of true independence felt intoxicating after months under constant observation. The boutique saleswoman's friendly chatter about an upcoming neighborhood festival provided delightful normality, a conversation devoid of hidden meanings or power dynamics. Cassandra purchased a deep green sweater, imagining a life where such simple interactions were commonplace rather than exceptional. Reality intruded harshly as she exited the shop, her gaze colliding with a horrifyingly familiar face across the street. Peter, emerging from a coffee shop, his attention momentarily directed toward his phone. Panic froze her mid-step, the shopping bag slipping from suddenly numb fingers. Peter looked up, his expression shifting from casual distraction to predatory recognition with chilling speed. Cassandra's feet finally responded to her brain's desperate commands, carrying her into the nearest crowd, as her heart thundered painfully against her ribs. The protective bubble of William's territory now seemed miles away as she navigated unfamiliar streets, constantly glancing over her shoulder. Peter's voice called her name from somewhere behind, the sound striking terror through her core more effectively than any weapon. Ducking into an alleyway proved disastrous, a dead end trapping her between brick walls as Peter's footsteps approached with deliberate slowness. His face had always been handsome in conventional ways that masked the cruelty beneath, now openly displayed in his triumphant smile. "Found you," he said simply, blocking the alley's exit with his body, hands casually tucked into jacket pockets, as though they were meeting for a planned date. "You've made this much more difficult than it needed to be, Cass." Before he could advance further, a black sedan screeched to a halt at the alley entrance, 2 of William's men emerging with efficient purpose. Peter's confusion at the interruption quickly morphed to alarm as they positioned themselves between him and Cassandra. The men said nothing, their stance and unwavering attention communicating all that was necessary. Peter retreated a step, then another, his expression cycling through anger, calculation, and finally reluctant withdrawal as he recognized the implicit threat. Cassandra's relief at the intervention mingled with disturbing realization. William's surveillance had never truly ceased, merely become less obvious at her request. The knowledge that her movements remained monitored stirred complicated emotions, gratitude for the timely rescue warring with resentment at the continued invasion of privacy. "He'll come back," William stated without emotion later that evening, his fingers steepled before him as they sat in his private office above Bellini's. The space reflected his personality, elegant but functional, power disguised as taste. Cassandra's hands trembled slightly as she clutched her tea, the afternoon's encounter having stripped away her carefully constructed sense of security. Peter's reappearance had reignited old terrors, phantom pains from healed bruises flaring at the mere sight of him. "Peter doesn't abandon what he considers his," she confirmed, hating the tremor in her voice, but unable to suppress it. 5 years of gradually increasing control, isolating me from friends, monitoring my calls, accidentally breaking things I loved when displeased. William's expression remained neutral, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes as she recounted Peter's escalating pattern of abuse. His knuckles whitened around his glass when she described the final incident that had prompted her escape. Peter's hands around her throat when she'd received a text from a male co-worker. "I could solve this problem permanently," William offered, the casual tone belying the gravity of what he suggested. "One phone call. He disappears. No questions, no traces." The offer hung in the air between them, tempting in its simplicity, yet terrifying in its implications. Cassandra had entered William's world understanding its boundaries and rules, but this moment represented a threshold. Accepting his solution would make her complicit in whatever fate befell Peter. "No," she finally answered, meeting his gaze steadily. "I won't become what he tried to make me, someone who hurts others to feel safe. There must be another way." William's approval surprised her, a genuine smile warming his usually guarded features as he leaned forward. "There is always another way for those patient enough to find it," he agreed, reaching for a slim folder on his desk. The folder contained detailed documentation of Peter's life since Cassandra's departure. Gambling debts accumulated at establishments connected to William's network, questionable business practices at his accounting firm, evidence of tax improprieties that would interest federal authorities, ammunition gathered without her knowledge for this inevitable confrontation. "Leverage is cleaner than violence," William explained, spreading photographs across the desk showing Peter entering various establishments known for high-stakes poker games. "We apply pressure indirectly until he decides leaving Philadelphia, and you, behind, is his best option." Their strategy took shape over the following days. Careful manipulation of Peter's growing financial troubles, anonymous tips to his employers about ethical concerns, pressure from loan sharks suddenly calling in markers. William orchestrated the campaign with the precision of a chess master, each move designed to incrementally increase Peter's desperation. Cassandra's role remained deliberately minimal. William insisted on keeping her separated from the actual mechanics of their plan, ostensibly to protect her, but perhaps equally to maintain his control over the situation. The power imbalance between them had never felt more pronounced. A week into their campaign, Peter attempted direct contact, appearing outside Bellini's after closing, clearly intoxicated and belligerent. William's men intercepted him before he could enter, the confrontation visible through the restaurant's front windows as Cassandra watched with her heart in her throat. The following morning brought unexpected development. A formal restraining order delivered to Aunt Harriet's house, filed by William's attorney on Cassandra's behalf, using evidence she hadn't known existed, photographs documenting her old injuries, medical records she'd never authorized releasing, witness statements from former neighbors. William had crossed another boundary without consultation, the protective gesture simultaneously comforting and disturbing in its presumption. His resources and connections had accomplished in days what might have taken her months, yet the ease with which he'd accessed her private medical history sent a chill through her. "We need to establish boundaries," Cassandra stated firmly, facing William across his desk the following evening, her voice steadier than her nerves. The restraining order had triggered an overdue conversation about the parameters of their arrangement. William's expression remained neutral, though something like respect flickered in his eyes at her confrontation. "I acted to protect you," he responded, his tone lacking the defensiveness Peter would have displayed when challenged. Their negotiations stretched into hours, evolving from tense disagreement to thoughtful exchange as they redefined their alliance. William conceded to consult her before taking actions on her behalf, while Cassandra acknowledged her need for his protection against Peter's escalating threats. The compromise felt like genuine progress, William treating her as a partner rather than a possession, her autonomy respected even within the confines of their unorthodox relationship. The subtle shift in power dynamics between them promised a foundation less built on control and more on mutual respect. Peter's response to their campaign proved more erratic than anticipated. Instead of retreating under pressure, he became increasingly reckless. Anonymous threats arrived at Aunt Harriet's house, hang-up calls in the middle of night, once a brick through the front window that shattered the early morning silence. William's security detail doubled around both Cassandra and her aunt, the men now openly visible as a deterrent rather than maintaining their previous discretion. The neighborhood residents adjusted to this heightened presence with knowing glances, confirming Cassandra's suspicion that unusual activities were commonplace in William's territory. Cassandra found unexpected solace in her growing friendship with Beth, the stern restaurant manager whose initial coldness had melted into protective camaraderie. During quiet moments between shifts, Beth shared stories of her own escape from an abusive husband in Boston, revealing the network of women William had helped over the years. "He builds sanctuaries, not prisons," Beth explained, expertly chopping vegetables in Bellini's kitchen long after closing. "The difference is subtle but critical. He creates spaces where broken people can rebuild themselves without fear." The morning routine Cassandra established reflected her gradual reclamation of normalcy: coffee on Aunt Harriet's porch regardless of weather, financial records organized by color-coded systems, evening walks through designated safe zones within William's territory. These small rituals of independence served as anchors in the storm of Peter's escalating threats. William's network extended further than Cassandra had initially realized, his influence reaching into city government, where a sympathetic judge expedited paperwork for stronger legal protections. The restaurant's regular clients included detectives who, coincidentally, increased patrols near Aunt Harriet's home, their silent acknowledgement of William when dining at Bellini's speaking volumes about the complex ecosystem of power in Philadelphia. On a rare evening off, Cassandra discovered William's private apartment above another of his businesses, a high-end wine shop 3 blocks from Bellini's. Her unexpected visit to discuss a discrepancy in the restaurant's books revealed a side of him carefully concealed from public view. The space contradicted her expectations, not the ostentatious display of wealth typical of men wielding his kind of power, but rather a sanctuary of understated comfort, filled with books, classical records, and surprisingly skillful charcoal sketches signed with his initials. The artwork depicted Philadelphia streetscapes, including one of Aunt Harriet's house that captured its essence with haunting accuracy. "You draw," Cassandra observed, the revelation of this unexpected talent forcing her to recalibrate her understanding of him yet again. William's shrug conveyed practiced nonchalance, but the careful organization of his art supplies betrayed the importance of this private creative outlet. Their conversation shifted from business to personal history as midnight approached, William revealing fragments of his past previously concealed: his father's imprisonment when he was 12, the grandmother who raised him with strict moral paradoxes, his deliberate choice of criminal enterprise over the corporate world that had rejected him based on his background. The parallels between them emerged with startling clarity, both shaped by people who had tried to control them, both creating elaborate systems of protection against vulnerability. Their connection deepened as they recognized in each other the same careful vigilance against being diminished by others' expectations. Dawn found them still talking, the boundaries between protector and protected, employer and employee, blurring into something far more complicated. When William gently brushed a strand of hair from her face, the gesture contained none of the possessiveness that had characterized Peter's touches, only a question she wasn't yet ready to answer. The strange peace between them shattered 2 days later, when Peter escalated beyond threats to action. Aunt Harriet's car vandalized in the grocery store parking lot, a warning note left on the slashed driver's seat containing details of Cassandra's daily schedule that should have been impossible for him to know. The violation triggered immediate security protocols, William moving both women into secured apartments above Bellini's, his men conducting sweeping investigations that uncovered the unsettling truth. Someone within William's organization had been feeding information to Peter, a betrayal that sent ripples of tension throughout his carefully maintained power structure. William's rage at the discovery manifested not in the explosive violence Cassandra had feared, but in cold, methodical elimination of every possible security breach. The traitor, a recently hired driver with gambling connections to Peter, disappeared without fanfare, the matter handled with disturbing efficiency that served as stark reminder of the world she now inhabited. November arrived with bitter winds that mirrored the increasingly tense atmosphere surrounding Cassandra as Peter's obsession transformed into dangerous fixation. Despite the restraining order, financial pressure, and William's security measures, he persisted with escalating determination. The final provocation came without warning. A small package delivered to Bellini's containing photographs of Cassandra and William together, their expressions captured in moments of unguarded connection. The implicit message required no interpretation. Peter was watching, waiting, planning his retaliation for what he perceived as her betrayal. William's proposed solution remained unchanged, permanent elimination of the threat, but Cassandra continued to resist this final irrevocable step. Making him disappear won't solve the real problem, she argued, pacing the confines of her secured apartment. I'll still be running, just from memories instead of him. Their strategy sessions grew increasingly heated. William's criminal pragmatism clashing with Cassandra's determination to resolve the situation. Without crossing moral lines she still maintained despite her immersion in his world. The impasse between them strained their carefully constructed alliance. "I need to face him," Cassandra finally declared, her decision crystallizing after nights of restless deliberation. "Not alone, but on my terms. Neutral ground. Witnesses present. Your security nearby but not visible." William's objections were immediate and vehement, his protective instincts warring with respect for her autonomy. Their argument stretched through the night, perspectives shifting gradually as Cassandra articulated her reasoning. Confrontation as reclamation rather than capitulation, facing her fears instead of allowing them to dictate her choices. By dawn, a compromise emerged. A meeting at a public cafe downtown. Legal representatives present to document any restraining order violations. William's security positioned strategically throughout the area. Cassandra would face Peter directly, but with substantial safeguards in place. The cafe had been chosen with strategic precision, owned by a former police officer with connections to William, its layout offering no blind spots or secluded corners where Peter might escalate unobserved. Cassandra memorized the exit routes William's security team had mapped out, the knowledge providing tangible reassurance as she prepared for confrontation. William insisted on driving her himself that morning, an unprecedented departure from his usual delegation of transportation duties. His hands gripped the steering wheel with uncharacteristic tension, his typical composed facade slipping just enough to reveal genuine concern beneath the calculated exterior. "You've changed him," Aunt Harriet observed the night before the meeting, helping Cassandra select an outfit that projected confidence rather than vulnerability. "In all my years working for William, I've never seen him personally involved in protecting anyone. His empire, yes, but not an individual." The lawyer William provided, a sharp-eyed woman named Gloria, with 20 years of domestic violence case experience, reviewed their strategy one final time before Peter's arrival. "Let him incriminate himself," she advised, adjusting the discreet recording equipment. "Your strength is in your calmness. It's what he can't predict or control." The message reaching Peter through carefully indirect channels offered what he had demanded since discovering her location. 10 minutes of her time, a chance to speak directly without intermediaries. His eager acceptance confirmed what Cassandra had suspected. His pursuit was driven by the need to re-establish control rather than genuine attachment. The appointed day arrived with glacial slowness, hours stretching as Cassandra prepared herself mentally for the confrontation. William remained uncharacteristically silent that morning, his concern evident in the tightness around his eyes as his men confirmed security positions throughout the meeting area. "Remember who you are now," he told her quietly as they parted, his hand resting briefly against her cheek in rare public display of affection. "Not who he tried to make you." The cafe bustled with lunchtime activity, strategic normality that would prevent Peter from creating a scene without witnesses. Cassandra chose a table with clear sightlines to all entrances, William's attorney seated at a neighboring table with recording equipment discreetly positioned. Peter's arrival sent a jolt of physical memory through her body, instinctive fear response to his presence that she acknowledged but refused to surrender to. His appearance had deteriorated since their encounter weeks earlier. Unshaven, clothes rumpled, dark circles beneath eyes that fixed on her with uncomfortable intensity. "You look different," he observed as he sat across from her, his tone suggesting accusation rather than casual observation. The comment crystallized everything wrong with their past relationship, his perception of changes to her appearance as personal affronts rather than expressions of autonomy. Cassandra's carefully prepared statements dissolved in that moment of clarity, replaced by simple truth. "I am different, Peter. I'm not yours anymore. I never really was, though both of us pretended otherwise." Peter's facade cracked at her direct challenge, his carefully cultivated charm giving way to the controlling rage that had always lurked beneath. "That mobster thinks he owns you now," he hissed, leaning forward with fingers clenched around his coffee cup. "You've just traded one cage for another." "No one owns me," Cassandra replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through her veins. "That's what you never understood. The difference between protection and possession, between partnership and control." Peter's expression darkened further, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper as he detailed his observations of her movements within William's territory. The extent of his surveillance confirmed Cassandra's decision to confront him directly. His obsession would never have faded without this confrontation. "I know about his operation, his businesses, his connections to city officials." Peter continued, desperation evident as he played what he believed was his trump card. One anonymous tip to federal authorities and his empire collapses, along with anyone connected to his finances. The threat, aimed at her position managing William's legitimate books, might once have terrified her into submission. Now she recognized it as Peter's final attempt to regain control through fear, a tactic that had lost its power once identified. "Everything I manage is legitimate and documented," she responded calmly, though her heart raced. "Report whatever you want. My work will withstand scrutiny, but consider what happens after. William's resources against yours, his connections against your increasingly questionable reputation." The calculated risk in mentioning William's potential retaliation paid off immediately, Peter's expression shifting from aggressive certainty to the first flickers of genuine fear. His research had revealed enough about William's operation to understand the implied threat wasn't empty. The cafe owner appeared beside their table with impeccable timing, ostensibly refilling water glasses while evaluating the tension between them. His casual presence served as subtle reminder that Cassandra wasn't truly alone, the establishment itself part of William's invisible safety network throughout Philadelphia. Peter's fingers drummed an agitated rhythm against the tabletop, his eyes darting toward the exits with increasing frequency as the balance of power shifted perceptibly between them. This reversal, Cassandra composed while he unraveled, represented everything he had feared since her departure. Her independence from the control he had meticulously constructed. "I've documented everything," Cassandra continued, sliding a sealed envelope across the table containing copies of dated photographs of her injuries, text messages containing his threats, witness statements from neighbors who had heard his violence. "This stays sealed unless you contact me again. Then copies go to police, your employers, and your family." She recognized the precise moment Peter accepted defeat, a subtle slackening around his eyes, resignation replacing entitlement in his posture. For the first time since meeting him 6 years earlier, Cassandra saw him clearly. Not the charismatic professional who had charmed her initially, nor the monster who had emerged later, but a fundamentally insecure man whose sense of self depended entirely on controlling others. "You have choices, Peter," Cassandra continued, seizing the advantage as his confidence wavered. "Leave Philadelphia, forget my existence, build a new life elsewhere, or continue this pursuit and face consequences from legal channels, professional repercussions. And yes, William's organization." The attorney at the neighboring table shifted slightly, ensuring the recording captured every word of Peter's earlier threats and Cassandra's measured response. This documentary evidence would strengthen the restraining order and provide leverage should Peter attempt further contact. "You think you've won," Peter snarled, his voice rising enough to draw attention from nearby tables. His composure cracked further as he registered the public scrutiny, the witnesses to his increasingly erratic behavior, creating exactly the scenario Cassandra had engineered. His departure came abruptly, chair scraping loudly against floor tiles as he stood, final threats muttered just loudly enough for her to hear before storming toward the exit. The relief of watching him leave flooded through her body like physical warmth after prolonged chill. William's men reported Peter's movements throughout the remainder of the day. Immediate visit to his apartment where he began packing hastily, phone calls to contacts in Chicago, purchase of a train ticket departing that evening. Their confrontation had achieved its purpose, pushing him toward the exit strategy she had carefully laid before him. 3 days passed without incident, then a week. Verification from William's extensive network confirming Peter had indeed relocated to Chicago. His Philadelphia apartment emptied, job resigned, local connections severed. The shadow that had hung over Cassandra's new life gradually dissipated, allowing her to consider her future without the specter of his return. "What happens now?" William asked one evening as they shared dinner on the rooftop garden above his wine shop, the city lights spread before them like earthbound stars. The question encompassed more than just security arrangements, addressing the undefined territory their relationship had entered. Cassandra considered the man across from her, complex, dangerous, protective without possessiveness, his power substantial yet increasingly wielded with her input and consideration. Not a savior or replacement controller, but a partner who respected her boundaries even while maintaining his own. "Now we negotiate new terms," she answered, reaching across the table to take his hand in deliberate gesture of chosen connection, rather than obligation. Equal partners with separate lives that intersect by choice rather than necessity. The future stretched before them, complicated, morally ambiguous, but fundamentally different from the controlled existence she had fled. William's world offered protection without imprisonment, connection without ownership, power shared rather than imposed, an imperfect freedom, but freedom nonetheless. Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video, as your support is important for me to continue here.